This podcast is sponsored by Communicate and Connect Counseling, where we have a team of therapists who provide individual, couples, and family therapy services, all tailored to meet the needs of military and veteran families. To learn more about our services, visit www.communicateandconnect.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. You're listening to episode 54, which is part of our attachment theory series. And today we're talking on how to deal with separation anxiety in relationships with Megan McCullough. Megan, I'm so glad you're here. Separation anxiety is something that I'm excited that we're talking about. I'll tell you right now, my husband is gone and I'm feeling the separation anxiety. So I'm thinking, it's like good timing for this episode. But thank you so much for being here. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about you and your background as we get started.
Yeah, sure. I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Megan McCullough. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I practice in South Carolina in person, and I also practice virtually in Maryland. I'm also a military spouse of 19 years, have been through multiple deployments, geo-batching, schools, TDYs. So I really understand firsthand what it's like to, be separated.
Yeah, you've done it all. Is what I'm
Oh,
hearing.
yes. So
Over
you
and
sharing
over.
that your husband, yeah. So you telling me when your husband's gone, that really resonates. That feeling, I can really respect that.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm really loving right now is that you can talk to us both as a therapist, but as a military
Mhm.
spouse who's gone through it and who's gone
Yes.
through it so often.
Hmm.
19 years. Yeah. So maybe we could just talk a little bit first about like what is separation anxiety? I guess it sounds really straightforward. It's like I'm separated,
Yeah.
I feel anxious.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I would really look at separation anxiety as difficult emotions that arise when really one of your primary attachment figures is gone, right? And when we're talking about a military context, we know that the spouses are gone quite often. And it's quite often just, there's not a lot of notice. We don't really know when it's going to happen. And so there's actually a nervous system response when that person that you connect with is not around. And it creates a lot of feelings of it could be instability, be insecurity, could be nervousness, maybe some fear, but a lot of really uncomfortable emotions that are coming up when that person isn't there.
yeah, I like what you're sharing because I guess we label it separation anxiety, but it could be a lot of different types of emotions happening.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And I think that may manifest, differently with every person, maybe based on their own experiences, right? And
Yeah,
what they've been through in their own life.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was thinking when you said we often don't have a lot of heads up notice. My husband hasn't been gone very long, just a couple of days, but he told me on
Mm.
Saturday, he was like, "Oh, I told you I'm leaving, right?" And I was like, "No, you didn't."
Oh,
So,
yeah. And those first couple days, I think, are often the worst because it's still so fresh and you're still really in this stage of kind of this liminal state of how to be when this person is gone and you have to adjust to this new reality that you're in.
yeah,
Mm.
thankfully, this one he's not gone very long, but it is adjustment. That word really stands out to me.
Yeah.
It's like reworking my whole life in a way of when he's not here. Um,
Right.
So I'm thinking it seems just really normal to me that we would all have really difficult feelings when our partners are gone.
Yeah, it's very normal. And there's something that I've noticed that's so interesting in the military that I think a lot of spouses listening will resonate with this is there's almost sometimes this comparison, right? That we've seen of, well, your husband's only gone for 4 months, so that's really okay. And mine's gone for 18. And if we're looking at, attachment theory, it doesn't really matter how long they're gone. You're still going to feel the same because they're still not there.
Yes. Oh, I like that. I hope anybody listening is really taking that in, that
Yeah.
you could have those feelings regardless of how long they're going to be gone.
Absolutely. 100%. I hope someone, maybe you might hear that because, it can be tough in the community sometimes. Not everyone's supportive of each other.
Yes. Yeah. Which is unfortunate. I'm also thinking about, I know for me, I can be kind of like, I'll maybe do that to myself. Maybe someone isn't saying that to me, but I'll be like, oh, this is a short one. You know, like why am I having so many emotions about it?
Hmm.
I think that's really great. Even if somebody is in like a supportive spouse community, they might be thinking, well, I've done this 10 times, or this is
Yeah.
a short one. And I'm thinking, like, what's wrong with me that I keep having these emotions? I like that we're sort of saying it's really normal and it's normal anytime you're separated. And of course, you would be having those emotions, and it doesn't, maybe we should be having those emotions from an attachment perspective, that there's nothing wrong. I don't have bad coping skills or something if I am struggling.
Hmm.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, we can discuss a little bit more about, different, maybe what that looks like with attachment, or some people might have a more difficult time, right? If they've had previous negative experiences, maybe with attachment, maybe their primary parents really weren't someone they could connect with. And so there's an attachment rupture early in life. And so that could be something that could really be difficult for a spouse, could make it even more difficult going through a deployment. So just kind of
Yeah.
urging seeking mental health care for anyone, who this might resonate with, because it makes it extra hard.
Yes. Yeah. And I know, I think this is improving in general in our society around like stigma with mental health care, but there's often this idea like something is wrong or it's about a diagnosis.
Hmm.
But when I think about this sort of thing with separation anxiety, I'm like, it is normal to be having lots of feelings when you're separated.
Hmm.
That that counseling in this sort of context is maybe just about support. I don't know how you think about it and talk about it with people, but going through this rough life thing that is normal, that it's rough.
Yeah, but it's rough, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think so much of the military is, right, drive on and suck it up. And oftentimes, the spouses will see that in their service member, the husband or wife who's wearing the uniform, right? That person is often taught very different things than what you might be learning in therapy about how to cope. And so there's this cultural almost notion within the military too of sucking it up.
Yeah. And push forward and keep
Push
going.
right. Push forward and keep going. Push forward and keep going.
Yeah.
And so that's like sometimes, like you shared, there can be this internal stigma of, oh my gosh, I'm going to counseling and everyone's going through this together. So what's wrong with me? And really, there's nothing wrong with you at all. You're having very normal feelings to a very abnormal situation.
Yes. I love that phrase. Normal feeling in abnormal situation. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And we think about, separation in the military. Many times, our spouse isn't somewhere safe, right? So there's an extra layer of fear and worry.
Yes.
And oftentimes, too, if I'm jumping the gun, excuse me, but our spouses have very different mechanisms to deal with when they have to leave. So that can cause issues with attachment as well, too. If the spouse is having a very difficult time and then the one who left is pulling away or retreating as a way to cope. So that can definitely cause ruptures as well.
Yeah. Can you maybe give some more examples or like share a little bit more of what that might look like
Yeah,
in a couple?
absolutely. Sure. So I think I'm also a veteran myself. I spent 4 years on active duty. So I can speak to both sides of this.
Yeah.
The mentality as a soldier when you have to leave, whether it's a TDY, it could be a deployment, it could be a school, it could be any number of reasons why you're having to go. You really have to get into the mentality of being mission ready, and I have to focus on my task. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to detach a little bit from your family in order to stay focused and keep the mission done. And that does not mean that you don't love your family. That does not mean you don't miss them every second of the day. But for some people, kind of putting a little bit of an emotional wall up is the only way that that person can focus on their job, because it's too painful to think about the people that are left behind. So you
Yeah.
kind of go into a tunnel vision mode. So for any spouse that might be experiencing this, my husband did this when he deployed multiple times as well too, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just thinking I could see how that would cause a lot of friction or conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, if I don't know that's what you need to do to like that, that's my service member spouse's coping skill, that it would be too
Right.
painful to be thinking about missing us,
Mm-hmm.
that they have to go into tunnel vision mode to focus. If I didn't know that, I
Yeah.
could be taking it really personally, like, oh,
Yeah.
you don't miss me,
Right.
something like
And the
that.
spouse may not even know that they're doing this, right? This could be just an automatic, my mind turns on when I go to work and then I turn it off.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really, I think, probably helpful for us to remember
Mm,
or to know, because they may not be able to vocalize that or say like this is what I do to cope or have like a really direct conversation about that because it might be
absolutely.
automatic.
Right. It might just be very automatic, and it could be a repeated pattern in the marriage. So this is where getting a little bit of couples counseling could be helpful, even just a few sessions. I really like Corey Weathers. She's an LPC, and she has written a number of fantastic books about being in a military marriage. She's also a military spouse. Um, Fantastic. I think anyone would really appreciate her work too.
Okay, great. I actually haven't read any of her books. I'm not familiar with that name. What are some
Yeah.
of the like what's your
Yeah.
favorite?
So my favorite one that she put out is called Military Culture Shift.
Okay.
And it is absolutely, if I had done a PhD, I would have written this dissertation. It's about the shift of culture over the last 50 years within the military, and really different generational styles and what that means, and how that's manifested and affected service members and spouses via policy and changing cultures. Amazing.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. I'm gonna end up
Yes.
looking her up right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah, and she's a clinician and a spouse and very, active in the community. So definitely put her out there as well.
Okay, great. So I'm thinking the service member might shut off. I could see spouses sometimes shutting off,
Yes,
potentially, and
absolutely.
going
Hmm.
in the reverse. But I am sort of a little bit thinking about how do people navigate? How do they cope, maybe, when they're feeling all of those feelings?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
sure. Yeah, I think this is something that in my practice, I've been in practice for 15 years, working primarily with the military, with the VA. Now I'm in private practice, but this is something I've seen multiple times, just over and over again through my career. And it causes a lot of tension in marriages. It causes a lot of friction and a lot of problems, because communication is absolutely key around issues like this. It's one of the most important things, I think, to realize and to navigate as a couple. How do we deal when we leave? And it could be really messy at first. You might have no idea how to do this the first time your spouse leaves, and that's okay. That's all right. I'll say for myself personally, having gone through 3 deployments and basically 2 years of living apart for schools, and then 5 years of geobatching. For my own marriage, I would say that communication is the most important thing that has saved us, and really learning my emotional needs when he's gone and vice versa. And it's taken years to learn that. So
Yeah.
for anyone who might be struggling, please know that this is not something that you figure out right away. It's so hard.
Yeah. I am appreciating how normal you're making it sound. Like this is just sort of how it goes when it's like military life, I guess.
I think, yeah, I'm a very realistic therapist in my practice. And I think sometimes people just need more validation of this is hard and it's okay that it's hard. And let's talk about it together and figure out how do we deal with this, right?
Yeah.
No, I was saying for myself, I have to work out. Critical for my mental health. I have to exercise. I see my own therapist. I have an amazing support group of friends that have kept me sane, and really focusing on keeping myself busy have been the biggest things that have helped me.
Yes, I hear that a lot, the busyness. I also have an individual therapist that I see as well.
Mhm.
And I like to share that because I think a lot of people, I guess, are thinking like I just have to cope enough and it won't be a struggle. Uh,
Right, right.
yeah, versus no, the reality is it is a struggle. It's a struggle for
Yeah.
everybody.
Even with all of the supports in place, it's still a struggle.
Yeah.
And, thinking about how does that change the way we talk to ourselves about it? If our framework is, of course, this is hard. This is super hard versus what's wrong with me for feeling this way.
Yes. Yeah. I like that so much. And I'm thinking it applies to thinking about the relationship too. I've had some couples who, like, right around the deployment time, it gets so stressful because of all of this separation anxiety, and we're both trying to figure out how to cope. And communication can be really messy, especially if I have a lot of messy feelings.
Hmm.
It's hard to learn to communicate and communicate well when I'm having all of these feelings and we're having these kind of opposite feelings.
Yeah. And you only have a few days together, right? Before
Yeah.
the person's leaving and you want to maximize it, but then everyone's on edge. And maybe that's okay.
Yes. And then reminding ourselves that it's okay. Nothing's wrong, like nothing's wrong with
Mhm.
me, but also nothing's necessarily wrong with the relationship that we're not communicating our best, or it feels more of a struggle between us. I'm thinking that feels like an important thing to keep in mind as well, not just for like, yes,
Hmm.
for me and the struggle I'm going through, but also this is not indicative of the quality of our relationship or whether we're meant to be together or whether we should stay together. All of the struggles with deployment are normal. They're the reality, and we are. I guess we're kind of like we're waiting, a lot of waiting for it to end.
And then the part that people don't talk about enough is the reintegration part. Yeah, I found that's actually harder than the deployment.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, it was like I really wanted to. I was like, finally, I get to be with you. But my partner did not, was kind of like so exhausted, just wanted to sleep and watch TV and like be zoned out from things for a while to reset.
Yes.
And I so wanted to be like, well, let's talk, let's do all the things, let's be together because I've been without you for so long.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that, talking about separation anxiety is that things might take a little bit of time to settle back down. And that's also okay because there's sometimes a lot of uncomfortable feelings around coming back home, about readjusting to what it's like to be together again. And if both people have maybe coped in ways that maybe weren't, the most beneficial, then it's hard to unpack that, right? When you come back.
Yes. Yeah, I just had a memory of when my husband came back from his first deployment. I was mad. I went to go pick him up. I was so excited on the way to pick him up. And then I got there and I saw him and then I was instantly angry. And, and I was angry that he had left and it took me a while to to get out of that emotion and really threw him
Yeah.
off thinking that that's
Mm,
like key part of separation anxiety maybe that would be on the other on the other end, the reintegration.
absolutely. Yeah. And think about how normalizing, anger, right? A lot of times there's anger
Yeah.
around this. Why is the military telling my spouse to go again? Why does this have to happen again? You just left. And remembering that, loving someone who loves something so much larger can be really hard sometimes to
Yeah.
hold space for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any I guess tips or things that you like to share either
Hmm.
with your clients or with like when you run into military spouses? What do you have anything that you like to tell them of like here's how to navigate this, maybe?
Wow. That's such a big question.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish there was, just here's the magic website that tells you how to navigate all of this.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking for counseling, it can be really helpful to find someone who is maybe a military spouse or has had some affiliation with the military. It can be really validating to talk with a clinician that you don't have to spell out the acronyms
Yeah.
and that understands we're PCSing again. He's going TDY, blah, blah, blah. And they get it. There's a real beauty in that. So I would really encourage, spouses to look for someone who might have some lived experience with what you've gone through.
Yeah.
I also, I really am a big fan of what we call grounding skills. I work a lot with nervous system regulation and how to actually calm your system down through somatic therapy. So I found that when we feel internally wound up and we can tell that we're wound up internally, one of the best things you can do in that moment is to find a way to maybe come back to your feet, focus on the ground, what it feels like to be present, and really focus on what it feels like, maybe just to be in your feet, just for 20 or so seconds. That does calm down the nervous system and helps to regulate things just a little bit.
Yeah. Even just you talking about it, I sort of started noticing my feet.
Yeah,
I
we
can,
don't notice our body. Yeah.
you
Yeah. We stay in our heads all the time and starting to notice maybe what our body's telling us and how we can calm ourselves down, especially with attachment. A lot of stuff going on with the nervous system that if we can learn why it's happening and how to internally self soothe it, we can find a lot of progress.
yeah. Yeah, I really like that concept of self-soothing because I think in this context where the reality is it is hard, there no matter what you do, it's not going to be hard. It's not going to not be hard.
Right. Yeah.
That then it sort of comes down to how can I maybe try to get comfort, the self-soothing.
Yes.
How can I take like I don't know, take the edge off, make it a little more. Yeah, I guess I just keep going back to comfort, like this needing of comfort.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
doing all the hard things.
Yeah. And even for some people, looking at a picture of your spouse when you feel really activated, just looking at that picture, allowing yourself to feel those feelings come up of love, that can even shift your nervous system a little bit too.
Yeah.
That comfort, that safety. Yeah. And think about this as well, right? When our spouses are deployed, we want to keep it together for them. I remember when my husband was deployed, we were talking on Skype. I think it was Skype then. And all of a sudden in the background, I hear, this plane bombing everything to crap. And I think I said, "Do you need to leave?" He was like, "Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. No." So to think about, our response has to be, "Oh, okay. All right. We can't freak out, right?" So how do we soothe ourselves during
Yeah.
that process?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about how that's even more important if I'm going to somehow be strong for other people. Like if I'm in that scenario, I'm kind of being strong for my spouse, like that falling apart on the phone, even if I want to. But then I'm
Right.
also think we don't have kids, trying to avoid it as long as I can. So
Valid.
yeah, but I know that so many people do. And then there's also that sense of like, oh, I also have to take care of our kids and help them
Oh,
through all their
yes.
emotional reactions. And they would be going through separation anxiety as
Hmm.
well. And I'm thinking how much more important it is that I somehow can self-soothe or get comfort and and maybe even validate myself that it is so hard um,
Right.
in order to one, because it's going to be good for me and it's going to help me, but then also to help these other people that I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. For our last 3 years, we chose to actually geobatch. He was in DC and I was in South Carolina, and
Yeah.
for a lot of different reasons. But our daughter was 6 and was starting to really have some issues with daddy being gone too. So yeah, that really resonates with me as well. That
Yeah.
it's hard for not just us, but right, everybody else around us, and we're the one holding it together.
Yeah. And that all of the emotions, like how I might feel angry or sad or anxious or
Hmm.
just kind of like not at ease, intense, that everybody in the house is probably feeling that too, that they have
Absolutely.
big emotional reactions.
Yeah, of course, of
Yeah.
course. And I think what you mentioned about strength, right? I have to be strong. I've encountered this with the military over and over again. It's, well, I have to be strong. So therefore I can't do X, Y, and Z. And for me, that's the biggest fallacy, because being strong means you're admitting I need some help. That does not mean you're not strong. In fact, that means you're, I think, incredibly
Yeah.
tough. You can say, in the system that I'm in, right? In this system that wants me to be a war fighter, I still I still have to take care of myself. And I could be tough and also get help.
Yes. I like what that goes right back to the
Oh
uh,
yeah.
culture conversation of like strong is not when we talk about strong, maybe because
Yeah.
we're both therapists, we're not thinking push through. We're thinking take care of myself, notice that I need comfort and support and resources so that way I can keep going
Right.
versus depriving myself of and trying to keep going. Yeah.
And I think, for all spouses listening, I know it can be a lonely life out there if you just PCS or you don't have any friends. One of the most important things to do is maybe just find one person that you can connect with. If that's an old friend from high school, if that's a family member, but we're talking about attachment. And if your spouse isn't there, your primary person, who else can maybe fill that need for just a little bit and to help? Who can you turn to during that time?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of a quote. So I know you and I are just meeting today, but I do mostly couples counseling, using
Mm.
EFT. And so I'm thinking of like Sue Johnson right now, who is like the founder of the type of therapy I do. And she would say, like, we're all wired for connection. And if
Hmm.
so, I like what you're saying. It's like I still need my connection needs to be fulfilled. And my spouse can't necessarily do that while they're deployed. And and that it's okay to get those needs met other places, likely still in a consensual way that your partner
Yeah.
is aware of,
Yeah.
not just
Yes.
like infidelity, but I think that is
Yeah.
part why that can happen is like we still need connection needs. but that can be
Absolutely.
by visiting family members, I used to do like phone dates, like every week, a scheduled phone date with my best friend,
Oh,
and things like that really, really helped.
even, for people that find spirituality to be helpful, church could be something that would be really great if that's good for you. A fitness community could be fantastic, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The community aspect is what seems really common across those different activities. Like the
And it's
activity,
changed over the time, right? Women used to stay home more and it was a very different military, and it's not like that anymore. So I think it's even harder to make connections because it's not a stay-at-home spouse anymore, wife, right? We're thinking
yes.
traditions.
Yes. Yeah. Where then all the stay-at-home spouses could
Hmm.
get together during the day
Yeah,
and hang out,
right.
watch the kids and chat. Yeah, so many people are dual income households.
Hmm.
So, and
So even more lonely, right? If you're not connected. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I was never connected with any of my husband's units for a lot of different reasons. He had a lot of weird jobs. I didn't want to. But yeah, not having that connection can also be really lonely. But I'd always worked outside and had those needs met elsewhere. But if I hadn't, that would have been devastating.
yeah. So I think what we're saying is it's okay if your connection can't isn't met by other military spouses or in like a military community, that you could find
Absolutely.
all these other sort of communities to join that could help you both with distraction but also emotional support while your spouse is gone.
Absolutely. And I love how you said kind of thinking outside the military community. It doesn't have to be there. For a lot of reasons, people may not want to utilize the military community for support. And, that's okay. So find it in any way that it looks like for you. There's all kinds of online military spouse groups. Every installation I know has a Facebook page. We all know sometimes a lot of drama there. We get
Yeah.
that, but it can be a great place for resources.
Yes. Well, I'm sort of just thinking, like anybody who's listening, they might get stationed in South Carolina, or they might be where you are located. How could people find you and work with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am licensed in both South Carolina and Maryland. For Maryland, it would be virtual only. You can find me at www.meganmccullough.care, Care. I am also on Facebook. It is Megan McCullough Counseling. You can reach me either way. Just shoot me an email and I'll get back to you.
Okay, great. I will be including links to that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to easily find you, they can just go and click from it from listening to this podcast. And
Awesome.
yeah,
Or if anyone's moving to South Carolina and just wants a military friend or just wants some support, please reach out that way as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you included that. That's a very kind offer. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. It's hard. I've been there a million times and yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for our listeners before we end?
Yeah, I would just say for anyone listening, the military community, it's my heart. It's what I've grown up in, but it's a really tough life and it's a really unique life. And not a lot of people understand your experience and what you're going through. So I can just shout out to all of you people out there. This is hard and you're doing fantastic, even if you think you're not.
No. Thank you. I can like feel the encouragement and validation myself.
Oh,
So,
yeah, it's a crazy life. It's a beautiful life, but it's a crazy life.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
As part of this special series on attachment in relationships, I created the ARE quiz. This quiz uses brief accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement scale. which I used in my own dissertation research, and I use with each couple when I start working with them in couples counseling. This quiz helps you and your partner know how secure your relationship is, the level of distress you're in, when you should be considering marriage counseling, and what sort of behaviors you both can work on to help promote the security of your attachment bond. Make sure to check out the show notes to download a copy of the quiz. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.